Hey there, everyone. That sexy nerd is back again, and we're watching Henry Ford Extra History Part 2. So, boy, there was a lot of fascinating stuff in the last one, and again, a lot more fascinating than what I thought would be in this thing, especially since I just came here because of the recent award. What is it? Not riot. The recent strike. So I mean, it's really really interesting information, and Henry Ford just seemed to be like just a madman. He just, like, seriously, I can't even imagine like just breaking and just throwing stuff onto the kitchen table while your wife is cooking and she's watching the baby. I thought she would have just like taken his head off, but then again, they do become rich for it, so she probably saw it all coming. That's love for you, Anyway, let's just get into the episode. And remember, please smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe if you think I deserve it. And let's do this thing, y'all. But you can.
Grosse Pointe Racetrack, October 10th, 1901, 7th lap. Henry Ford is terrified out of his mind. He'd entered his new car into this race to get his name in the newspapers,
Already?
but not as an obituary. His racer, named Sweepstakes, has a 2-cylinder, 26-horsepower engine clocked at 72 miles an hour with no brakes. Also, he's never driven in a race and has never tried to turn the vehicle at high speed.
Okay, that's not just insanity. That is a mental illness. That is well, okay, fine. No, not even mental illness. No, he's just absolutely out of his mind. How? He just doesn't care about living.
Mechanic crouches on the running board, ready for breakdowns. Not to mention the track is a horse racing track, with dirt mounted on the curves to prevent cars from flying off. But every time Ford takes the turn, he feels like he's going to ram into the fence. His mechanic has to lean out to keep the car from flipping, and noise from the grandstand washes over them as they whip past. Their opponent, Alexander Winton, is a seasoned race driver. Hours before, he'd just broken the land speed record. Winton is ahead, but Ford is getting used to the curves and catching up. Then Winton's machine starts bleeding blue smoke. Coming around, 8th lap. Ford punches it on the straightaway and passes Winton, whose car is wreathed with cloud as his mechanic pours oil on the overheating engine.
He's sabotaged it.
Ford crosses the finish line and swears never to race again.
Yeah. You know why? Because he won it by luck, and he was like, yeah. See, that would happen to me too. If I ever just went a hand at poker, or I just put a coin in the slot machine and I got millions and millions of dollars, or how much, I'm not going back and never gambling again. I'm taking that money and leaving. I don't care how addictive y'all say it is. Once I get that money, I'm gone.
Thanks so much to Factor for keeping us well fed on a busy schedule. By the time Henry Ford won the 1901 sweepstakes, Detroit was well on its way to its nickname of Motor City. Car companies were opening everywhere in Detroit, with the same chaotic boomtown feel as the gold rush or oil strikes in Pennsylvania. Wow. And ironically, many of the people involved then are still household names today. In Detroit, the man to beat was Ransom E. Olds, whose Oldsmobiles were already in production in 1901. And for potential challengers like Ford, one of the best ways to attract attention and investment were publicity stunts, such as winning races, setting speed records, or driving long distances.
You're too slow.
Actually, Alex Winton, his opponent in that 1901 race, had won backers for his own car company by driving his show model from Cleveland to New York City.
Wow.
Similarly, Ford's race win secured him financial backing by a group of rich Detroiters he'd been cultivating as potential investors for years. And in 1901, those investors helped him form the Henry Ford Company and started working on a production model single-cylinder car. Or rather, they worked on it. Ford was mostly AWOL. See, he wasn't really interested in making single-cylinder runabouts, a term derived from a type of small carriage, to compete with Oldsmobile. Ford was usually elsewhere designing his next race car. After months of arguments with the investors and a new engineer they brought in, he voluntarily left the company with a $900 buyout. This was part of a repeating pattern for Ford, whose resentment for bankers and money men, both air quotes, would only grow. Ooh, there's the foreshadow again. The Henry Ford Company, no longer having Henry Ford, quietly folded and was never heard from again.
Where's my foreshadowing?
No, I'm joking. It just renamed itself Cadillac.
Really?
Meanwhile, Ford had enough money to support himself plus an idea for a race car that would build on his reputation as a designer of high-performance vehicles. He partnered with 2 professional bicycle racers, the closest thing to seasoned race car drivers at the time, to create the ultimate racing machine. Caring not for aesthetics, they stripped every bit of excess weight off it until it was nothing but a massive engine, a pipe frame, and a steering yoke. Because the car was so wild, the driver needed more leverage than a wheel could provide. They built two models, christened Aero and 999, but apart from setting a land speed record in 999 on a frozen lake where it was relatively safe, Ford would not drive either of these two wild beasts in a race. They'd hire a driver for that. But after a series of technical setbacks, Ford lost confidence in the machines and bailed once again, taking a buyout. This was a smart move in many ways. See, the cars were so associated with Ford that when 999 won another high-profile race and went on to tour the country, Ford still got the credit as a designer. AKA zero responsibility, but all the glory. And it was off the back of that PR victory that Ford met the Detroit coal delivery entrepreneur Alexander Malcolmson, and the two formed a plan to manufacture vehicles. The idea was simple. They wouldn't manufacture a car, they'd assemble it. The parts could come from suppliers who were better at manufacturing the individual components, and the main machinists they relied on were a pair of brothers who Ford worked with briefly at the Henry Ford Company, who had experience supplying Oldsmobile and were, well, a little nuts. They were old school front.
They're nuts? Oh, can't wait to hear these people. Henry Ford sounds like a freaking mental patient here.
Tier types, known for saloon brawls and packing revolvers. In fact, once, one brother had an altercation with a bartender that ended with him pointing a gun at the poor guy and making him dance on his own bar top while he smashed up the establishment to the tune of $30,000 of damage.
Whoa.
Those brothers were named John and Horace Dodge. On June's...
Oh, see, again, they want to say that criminals that know they want to act like criminals are just doing whatever the hell and breaking the law and doing whatever, but most of these people that are manufacturers now broke the law too. That's crazy.
16th, 1903, Ford, Malcolmson, the Dodge brothers, and several small backers who'd borrowed money from friends and family gathered to form the Ford Motor Company.
And that's their
Ford,
gang.
with his history of bailing on partners, however, would be vice president and not president this time round. Of course, years later, these men would all be millionaires. But that was in no way certain in June 1903. They had a prototype of their new Model A, and were getting orders, but they were assembling it in a rented wooden factory meant for carriage building. They ran into quality problems with suppliers, and money dwindled. Plus, always preferring to work in 3 dimensions, Ford liked to jump from concept drawings to fabricating parts right away, then make adjustments from there, which is a very expensive way to work. When on July 23rd, the first Model A was delivered to a buyer, the company only had $223 in its bank account. Soon, though, money wouldn't be a problem.
That's not bad,
The 1903 Model A was a roaring success.
That's not bad. That's not a bad amount of money to, like, after you're finally done with everything and you spend all your money on that stuff that might make you money later. Like $225 is nothing that bad, especially back then. Ugh.
However, sales did lag behind its rival Oldsmobile model, which sold for $150 cheaper.
Wow.
Ford kept tinkering, replacing the A with a modified Model AC with a redesigned engine. The next year, they followed it with the Model B, which put the engine up front rather than under the driver's seat. And by the end of 1904, Ford had moved its operation to a purpose-built brick plant and was the 4th largest car manufacturer in the nation, though still behind Oldsmobile and Cadillac. Ford began to rely less on suppliers, bringing the manufacturing increasingly in-house. But as more and more models of cars claimed their letters of the alphabet, a battle was brewing in the corporate boardroom over the direction of the company. Malcolmson and Ford, who jointly owned a controlling stake, were at odds.
But
Malcolmson wanted to produce high-end cars, like the enormously profitable Model K with its powerful 6-cylinder engine, whereas Ford wanted to capture the mid-range market, with cars like the Model N, and eventually begin moving enough product to bring the price down. The head of the company sided with Ford, and they bought out Malcolmson's shares.
Wow.
Then, in a grim happenstance, a few months later, the company president dropped dead of a heart attack, and Ford took over, his power now absolute. He set aside a...
Anybody who watches any medieval stuff or Game of Thrones or anything in history, did Ford poison him? Nah, I'm sure not. I think there's just everybody. He seemed old enough to be like,
room with several designers and began to work on a new concept. Ford wanted to create a car for the masses, not one that was as cheap as the $250 runabouts being pumped out by other companies, but a vehicle middle-class families could afford. One that would liberate the American public and end the isolation of the country's rural farmers. A car, in short, that families like his could have bought. It would need to be sturdy, its 4-cylinder engine powerful but not overpowering, easy to drive and relatively attractive with a top speed of 42 miles an hour, and crucially, it should be easy to fix. An owner should be able to repair...
No, actually, Fords are actually relatively cheap to fix. They just break really badly. Like, you know, try getting a Ford Fusion or something that'll last with a transmission. It'll last over 100,000 miles with its transmission. I dare you.
...it themselves with no special training. But as he worked with his draftsmen down on the factory floor, the employees themselves started working on an experiment. See, Oldsmobile had recently sped up production with a concept known as the moving assembly line. An idea that if you hung an engine, for instance, on a moving track, and had each worker do a specific part of the assembly, you could produce cars more efficiently. Ford loved this concept, tinkering with it himself to fine-tune it. And when his newly designed vehicle, the Model T, first crossed the factory floor in 1908, it would do so on hanging tracks and conveyor belts. And true to Ford's vision, it would change the world. The Model T was enormously popular, and 15 million of them would come off Ford's assembly lines in the next 19 years. They would be used as tractors and firefighting vehicles, as pleasure cars and workhorses of family transportation. But it would also be used for field ambulances. For as 1914 approached, the world was entering a dark period,
World War.
and Henry Ford would increasingly descend into darkness as well.
So, yeah, that was actually really fantastic again. I can't wait to see what happens during World War One. Oh, man. What did you guys think of the episode? And did it change your opinion on Ford? I know most of y'all are never going to buy a Ford because, you know, because of Toyota and all that stuff and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, let me know what you thought about the video in the comments. And remember, please, smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content. And subscribe if you think I deserve it. And I'll see y'all in the next video.